And we are live. If there was any time to go live, it's now. Andy Ruiz Jr. shocks the world. Andy Ruiz Jr. defeats Anthony Joshua, not something that many people saw coming. Andy Ruiz Jr. lives up to his nickname, the Destroyer. This was really an interesting fight, absorbing fight. So to see what's going to happen here, we've got 13 people in the chat at the moment. Drop some thoughts on this fight. What did you make of it? Really incredible scenes. Andy Ruiz Jr., the Destroyer, stops Anthony Joshua in the 7th round, has him down 4 times. And really after the 3rd round, he didn't look like he ever really recovered. Hurt again in the 6th round with some body shots. But that 3rd round was pivotal. Really was. I didn't actually think he was going to beat the count the second time, the second knockdown. And the bell, it well and truly saved him. So we've got Letoy saying, mean upset. Will Magic Man, first time here, and it's great. What an unbelievable outcome. Actually, this is only the 2nd time I've ever gone live, Will. So, the reason is, this was a pretty monumental result in the heavyweight division. And this is part of the reason that I love heavyweight boxing so much, because, one big punch can change a fight. And when Andy Ruiz Jr. got up off the canvas in that 3rd round, and he fought fire with fire, Joshua looking to come in, take him out, he smelt blood, he knocked him down, thought he was there for the taking. But Ruiz's speed and traded with Joshua in that exchange, and that changed the fight. Joshua hit, hurt, down. And yeah, incredible sort of stuff in the end. Dropped him 4 times in the fight. So we've got Adam Fay, he's saying, hey Squared, that is unreal. Andy always was a threat. And I think we all knew Andy Ruiz Jr., anyone who's followed heavyweight boxing for any length of time, that he was a good fighter. But how good was an open question? Just a second. Because there was a question over his activity. The record was a bit thin. We knew he was a good fighter given the performance he put up against Joseph Parker. Very close. Some would say controversial result there. I had that one a draw. That was a good fight back at the end of 2016. We've got Grant saying, I wonder what would have happened if the ref allowed Parker to throw on the inside. Well, that's a point, but it's also Joseph Parker fought a very cautious fight in that one. There were only moments in the fight where he really showed aggression and was tracking after Joshua. So it could have been one of those cases with a different game plan. Maybe he would have had some more success, but Joshua got the pretty comfortable points win in the end there. But that was one thing I was thinking about, Ruiz and Parker's performance. But then, you get the triangle theory going. It never quite works. But I think this win for Joseph Parker, it makes his record look a little bit stronger on the back of that. And Ruiz is definitely a top fighter. Before this fight, because of activity and, he really hadn't fought anyone in a couple of years, Dimitrenko, which was on April 20th, that was probably the best win of his career. So heading into a Joshua fight on the back of that win, plus the inactivity, I didn't hold a lot of hope for Ruiz Jr., and that's why I had him, I was saying he was inside the top 20, but I couldn't on the basis of performance, because you can't just on potential have someone as a top 10 fighter. I didn't really know how good he was, but he proved tonight. Very good fighter, and he's the unified heavyweight champion. Try that emphasize, unified heavyweight champion. That really is something. So I'll just get to some other comments here. So as he says, what's good boxing squared? Hey, how are you? So it's 4:30 in the afternoon here. Pretty massive result. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of shocked fans and probably a lot of shocked casual fans too. There was online from, and you can obviously tell when someone is a casual fan, some of the statements that they say, they don't sort of mix with reality. But looking at Ruiz coming into, I think David Hay had said, coming into the fight, if you looked at Ruiz, you could probably pull someone out of a pub and they would look like Ruiz, and that was the sort of, how he was saying casuals look at a guy like Ruiz. But he proved that you don't have to be the body beautiful to be the heavyweight champion. And I would hazard a guess now, because Andy Ruiz Jr. has obviously been pushing for a Snickers sponsorship. It wouldn't surprise me at all. But I guess what do we see now? Is it going to be a rematch? And is that going to be in the UK towards the back end of the year? Maybe September, a bit later, November or December? Be interesting to see. If you caught the post-fight interviews, because I went straight into my video recording it, because, obviously the excitement of the shock upset, I was just straight into it. If you caught it, what did Ruiz say and what did Joshua say? I'd be interested if someone could drop that down here. We've got Underworld saying AJ believed his own hype. Tioni can't be a champion forever. Well, that's also true. I've been saying for a long time now, with these guys sort of putting off each other, eventually one of these guys is going to have a banana skin fight and they were going to lose. And we saw that. This just happened to be Joshua's banana skin fight. And it just so happened to be the late replacement opponent of Andy Ruiz Jr., the guy that was a massive underdog, and now it's one of the biggest upsets in heavyweight boxing history. And I guess it sort of leads to a question here as well. Should Anthony Joshua, after Jarrell Big Pharmacy Miller tested positive, should they have actually called off this date? Should they, that's a question now, because you look at the performance by Joshua, it wasn't a great performance, barring the sort of knockdowns and all that sort of stuff. He didn't look fantastic in there from the get-go. There was the feeling out process in the first couple of rounds, but he never really settled into his work, never got comfortable. Didn't really sort of, fight, I think, like many would have expected. So if I just get back here to the chat. What just happened, man? Well, that's a good question. Andy Ruiz just happened, the Destroyer. So Rev James C says, well, I knew it would be a good fight, but it was better than I expected. I'm off to the shop to buy a Snickers. Yeah, I think Snickers will be pretty happy with all this free publicity that they're getting. Stanley says the Drake curse is real. You have to tell me more about that. As he says, do you think AJ wants the rematch? I'm not sure. Well, I mean, if he ever wants to truly cement his legacy, because obviously, you look at the situation. Joshua, who's been fighting exclusively in the UK, I should say, comes over to the United States and has a nightmare debut. I still believe that, and it's not to say he can't come back from this, because he totally can. But he needs to probably have that rematch, and it'd probably be good if it was in the United States, actually. He's going to have to go back there if he ever wants to truly become this big global sporting superstar, which he was on the way to being. You've got to take over the United States boxing market. Yeah, I think they probably will have a rematch, but I didn't catch the post-fight, so I didn't hear what he had to say, or if in fact he was interviewed. But I'm just scrolling down the comments now, so if someone's put something, I'll get to that very shortly and read it out. So Enki says, I'm still in shock. I think a lot of people are. Lawrence Williams, hello to you too. Mika Ruiz was fearless. He was, and he was also very patient. He backed his chin, not a lot of wasted energy, and that composure was key in this fight, as was the speed. Oh, and Will's just saying, smash that like button. That would be much appreciated if you can do that. The software that I'm on, I can't actually see what the likes are at or anything like that. It's not the YouTube one, it's one that you connect to it. Adam says, Andy was avoided that much. It's clear, and when he got his chance, he took it. Puts Parker WBO title win into better light. It does. BG London says, I think that's bad guy, isn't it? This is great for boxing. Well, this shakes up the heavyweight division. Something chronic. Jeez, I'm starting to slip behind in these comments here. Where did I get to? Jeez, I'm way behind. Shouldn't they rematch? Who should Ruiz? Should they rematch? Yeah, I think they should. And if they don't, well, it's really up to Andy Ruiz Jr. It's probably going to be actually a mandatory. If Anthony Joshua doesn't elect to take the rematch, which I think he would, a full training camp for Ruiz, better plan. Sometimes heavyweight boxers have off nights, and sometimes it's your night, and it was Andy Ruiz Jr.'s night tonight. That was a very incredible performance by Ruiz. Calm, patient, under pressure, came off the canvas, fought fire with fire and dropped Joshua, and that was where the rot set in. As soon as he dropped Joshua, he never completely recovered there. Andy passed the chin check big time. Certainly he did. Damn, should have bet on Ruiz at the TAB. Yeah, I think a lot of people will be kicking themselves, but there was a lot of money that was coming in on Ruiz later towards the fight because the value was there. You know, you put a few dollars down, you get, say, $10, $15, $20 back. So there'll be some very happy people out there. Ruiz should probably be unbeaten, though the Parker fight was a draw. Yeah, I thought it was a draw. As soon as Ruiz hit the deck, I said he'd get up and knock AJ down, and he certainly did. Joshua was playing too much in Miami, cameras and interviews. There was an element of, was Anthony Joshua looking past Andy Ruiz? There was an element of this leading up to this fight because a few days out from fight night, there seemingly was, he was talking as much about Deontay Wilder as he was about Andy Ruiz Jr. And that was something I was thinking, yeah, is he really dialed in here? Is he focused? And that was one of the things that I said in my 10 things to watch for, that Joshua had to have complete focus heading into this fight. And it's a question, did he? I mean, a lot of people, you know, I'm judging from my comment section of my video that I just put up before, they didn't think Joshua quite looked himself in there. But full credit to Ruiz for actually capitalizing on, you know, Joshua's flaws, but also fighting fire with fire. He came in patient, yeah. Sporting Icons is on suicide watch. That was Les Goonie Pubes. Tombstone 416 says, yeah, Parker never got hurt by Ruiz in their fight. Well, they both clipped each other and their chins held up. Adam Fahey says, this is better than Lego. Not sure what that quite means. Tom Gregory, AJ overlooked him and paid the price. AJ will learn from this. And you can certainly make an argument that maybe this will be the making of Anthony Joshua here. Maybe he had got comfortable at the top. Maybe he just expected he'd breeze through this fight. This is certainly a hell of a wake-up call. Adam Fahey goes up 12 in my books. Goes up from 12 in my books. Not sure what that's about. Traveller Green, I'd imagine Josh was kicking himself for not staying back and dropping Ruiz in the third. Well, he obviously thought that he had him hurt there. He went in for the kill. And clearly, you know, that ended up sort of being a mistake because Ruiz, even though he was put to the canvas, he didn't look incredibly hurt or, you know, didn't look like his legs were gone or he was so woozy that he couldn't, you know, throw his punches. And obviously Joshua thought he was there for the taking and he was looking for it. And probably in the back of his mind, he had the whole thing of, I need to have a statement. That was something that there was some pressure for this fight on Joshua to perform. Knock out Andy Ruiz Jr., get the job done. But ultimately, you know, he paid the price for trading with Ruiz, who he thought was hurt, and came off second best in that exchange and ultimately turned the fight. BG London, I always said resume doesn't determine the winner. Joshua fans was obsessed with it. No, it doesn't determine the winner, but I think rightly so. People on form and who they'd been fighting, all that sort of stuff. Joshua, deservedly so, was the favourite for this fight. It didn't mean, though, that Ruiz Jr. couldn't fight. And that's what a lot of us were saying, that Ruiz Jr. is a good heavyweight. But was he at the same level? Did he have enough to beat Anthony Joshua? And clearly the answer is yes. Vato Locos Forever says, how many people lost money here? It's probably a good question. I actually wonder if the bookies are actually going to be going backwards on this because he was such an underdog. I'm sure there was a lot of people that had some big bets on Andy Ruiz and they would have been taking a bath on some of those bets. Tom Gregory, AJ looked vulnerable and scared in the corner. He didn't look himself. Yeah, some of the stuff in the corner it was interesting because he didn't quite seem as composed in some of those rounds and he was imploring Rob McCracken, tell me what to do, what's he going to do? And I don't really remember him, that lack of composure in other fights. How about you? I'm struggling to catch up on the comments here. Ruiz's best chance was always going to be early. And I think, there was nothing sort of spectacular about the game plan from Ruiz. He looked to come out and throw heavy shots. There was a feeling out process, largely, directed by Joshua in those first couple of rounds, who was managing and maintaining range, jabbing. But Ruiz, when he got his opportunity, those short shots, and he was hitting hard. And Joshua, I guess now that he was dropped 4 times in this fight, the questions about his chin are going to come back. Some people are already saying, well, he was dropped by Vladimir Klitschko, rocked by Povetkin, rocked by White, dropped 4 times in this fight. And actually the ending was a little bit bizarre. I mean, the whole not following the direction was a bit of a soft stoppage to the fight, but I thought that Joshua needed to respond to the referee, so I don't have any issue with the stoppage. He needed to respond. He was taking his time trying to crib those extra seconds, and the referee was like, nah, not having it. Back to the comments here. We have Christopher Mills. AJ has to do something with his conditioning. He was gassed after the first round, maybe too much of a bodybuilder. Well, that question will come out again. Michael Johnson, Boxing Talking More, at Will Magic Man, what it do? Jack R, AJ came far too heavy. He shouldn't have jumped on him after the knockdown. I guess in hindsight, jumping on him after the knockdown, it's sort of proved to be somewhat of his demise in this fight. In terms of the weight, I did wonder about 247.8. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's easy to sort of judge this, after the fight, after a performance that was lackluster. I think we have seen that his best weights in recent years have been somewhere between 245 and 242 and 247. So I didn't necessarily have an issue with him being 247.8. But maybe it was a bit heavy in retrospect. Maybe it was in hindsight, I should say. Husky Boys winning. That's from the Zombie. Marcus says, AJ not having fought for 8 months combined with his fight being in America with a change of opponent on top of that, I knew there would be an upset. And it's one of these things, you start to string together some of those things. It does beg the question, should they have actually stopped that fight? Not had the fight. After Miller was dumped because of the pets, should they have actually, scrapped that and rescheduled it? Would Joshua have done better if he'd had a full camp? A full camp to focus in on his opponent. And I guess this was actually something that was a bit different for Joshua, because I don't recall him having such a big fight, but only having a certain length of camp. I mean, he was in camp, but he wasn't preparing for Ruiz Jr. He was preparing for Jarrell Miller. And there is some similarities about what they were going to do, but, every fighter is different at the same time. That Jarrell Miller fight, had that actually gone ahead and had Miller not actually been, juiced to the gills, that would have been quite interesting to see what Jarrell Miller could have actually done. So Aaron says Joshua said he wants the rematch. Well, I think that's going to be one of the most anticipated fights for the heavyweight division in the rest of 2019. That is going to be a pretty massive fight, and there will be a lot of people who will say on the strength of this first fight that Joshua, he needs to do a lot better in the second if he wants to have a chance to get his belts back. Adrian Blair says, it's weird AJ has taken some big shots from other fighters and hasn't been affected that way. I'm surprised. Povetkin didn't knock him out with the openings if that was the case. Well, maybe he was actually hitting a bit harder. I mean, Joseph Parker, ahead of this fight, had said of Andy Ruiz Jr., of people he'd sparred with or had fought, that Ruiz hit the hardest. And he hadn't taken anything flush from Joshua in their fight, but of the people who'd landed clean on him, he rated Ruiz Jr.'s power. And I think we saw it tonight. He was able to hit and hurt Anthony Joshua. So Prophet says, I'm going to take a Snickers for my pre-workout. Will Magic Man says, I know. Chris, let's be real, Ruiz can fight, period. Yes, he can. Best advertisement for Snickers ever. Well, the amount of free publicity that they've got out of this. Philip Cruz says, said it for a while. Bruno too. Like, it's a bit early to say that. Joshua's come through. I mean, Frank Bruno, his career arc and trajectory was completely different to Anthony Joshua's. Sure, there's some similarities with their build and being muscle-bound, but Joshua has fought to the mountaintop. He has overcome some adversity, and he's defended his titles, 4 or 5 times. So I don't think the Bruno comparisons are completely fair. Some people will argue that, but I think Joshua's had a pretty good career to date. I mean, it took Frank Bruno quite a long time before he finally picked up his first strap. David Lee says, Boxing Squared, what's up? This is so crazy, man. And it is. I was screaming at the I was all over the place with, this was an incredible fight with the knockdown, and then Ruiz responds. It was, all over the place. It was good. Mika says AJ can come back from being unbeaten isn't everything. It's the great fights that matter. Unbeaten isn't everything, I should say. It's the great fights that matter. Well, this might be something that helps define him and makes him a better fighter. I mean, you often hear these stories about fighters who've been beaten who end up coming back and saying, well, this was a case where, that made my career, because until then I didn't know what it was like to lose. You hear those stories, and this might be the sort of the penny drop moment for Anthony Joshua, on something that he needs to do. I guess, does this raise the question that, with Rob McCracken as his trainer, if he couldn't get Joshua to respond to his instruction, is it time for a change there? That might be something that comes out of this as well, a question about that. Although, Rob McCracken, I didn't have any issue with his instruction in the corner, the stuff that, they were showing on the broadcast. I thought, it was pretty straightforward stuff that, he was telling Joshua to do. But Ruiz was sort of nullifying Joshua in there. He was able to, stop what Joshua was trying to do and respond, in kind. And the speed was something that was really troubling Joshua. Andy Ruiz's speed was something that Joshua didn't overcome in the fight. And when he was, hit and hurt, he never really recovered. And I did think it was quite interesting in that third and fourth round where the fourth and fifth round, Joshua clearly recovering, similar to after the Vladimir Klitschko knockdown, seemed to be just running on fumes. And Ruiz could have jumped all over him, but he didn't. I mean, do you think he was gassed there? Ruiz Jr., that is? I mean, he did sort of empty the tank to some extent. He was letting his hands go in round 3, trying to get Joshua out of there. For all money, I thought Joshua was gone after that second knockdown. The bell, that really did save him there, because if there had been a minute left in that fight, in that round after Joshua got up, I think it probably would have ended in the third. I mean, as we saw it took Joshua, he was, getting some time to recover, get his legs back under him. But it was by about the 6th round, he looked pretty spent. It was, expending a lot of energy just trying to keep Ruiz off him. And that body work in the 6th round, that was starting to pay real dividends for Ruiz. And, some telling shots, and ultimately got the job done in the 7th round. Back to the comments here. Will Magic Man says, get fat, guys. It's the latest trend. Isn't that a worldwide trend anyway? Aren't people trying to stop that? Robert says, AJ fought a fighter, a skilled fighter. Best one to beat Ruiz is Fury. Skill versus skill. I think a lot of people would favour Fury in that fight, having such a big advantage in height and reach. Much bigger than Joshua. But then again, Ruiz proved that even with his short reach, he was 8 inches less than Anthony Joshua, and at least 4 inches, possibly more, shorter than Anthony Joshua, that he was able to close the distance, get his work away. Adrian says, AJ seemed relieved in the post-fight interviews, to be honest, to be done with all the responsibility. He was way too happy for me. I haven't caught it, but I mean, maybe this is something that it's, the pressure is lifted from him. I mean, every time he goes in there, it's like tens of millions of dollars are on the line. I did think, actually, just before it came onto the live stream, how's Eddie Hearn coping with this? Just for the fact that, Anthony Joshua is the jewel in the crown. Does this translate literally to the bottom line for Matchroom with revenues falling or whatever? It may, to some extent, with Anthony Joshua, it may sort of stymie some of the growth in terms of money that he's bringing in. Every time you go into these fights, it's, millions of dollars are on the line, sometimes tens of millions of dollars. So, back to the comments here. Superman is dead, the hype train crashes in front of his fans. Chris Walker says, don't give him any excuses. Who? Joshua. Well, he was beaten by the better fighter tonight, that's for sure. Ruiz came in there, very patient, no wasted energy, very accurate, and the speed was, really something that Joshua was troubled by. And his power is real, we saw that. Adam Fahey says, AJ always starts slow, maybe he just couldn't adjust to the speed of Ruiz and the volume. Yeah, well, he does normally sort of take a round or two to sort of ease into his work, and he never got comfortable. Offend in every way. 4-inch height and reach advantage. Was 8-inch reach advantage for Joshua in this one. Retros or Die 79 boxing. He got thrashed by the peanut M&M man. Marcus says, Ruiz was too good a boxer to be a late replacement for AJ. Well, and this is some of the question now that obviously fans and potentially those close to Anthony Joshua will have. I mean, there might be some, especially close to Joshua, maybe his family, others involved with his camp who will be sort of ruining this, was this actually... I mean, because I think you always had to, if you were keeping that date, it had to be a certain level of opponent. And Ruiz fit that bill. There was talk of Michael Hunter, there was talk of Trevor Bryan, all that sort of stuff. They didn't tick enough boxes, but we knew which one was the harder fight, and it was Ruiz. And I guess after watching that, maybe Luis Ortiz will be silently kicking himself as well, because if they had have actually taken the fight, taken the offer, instead of calling it a low ball and then it turning out to be $7 million, maybe Luis Ortiz could have gone in there and won the title. You never know. That's gone, so he, as we know, I don't think Luis Ortiz is ever going to be fighting Anthony Joshua now. Joshua's going to have a hell of a fight on his hands in the rematch, if they have one, to get his belts back. Mike Up says, nobody gave Ruiz a chance. Never count your chickens before they hatch. And that's the whole thing. You can't look past your opponents. Although, it's easy for a lot of us, fans to think, okay, well, that's a 95-5 fight or an 80-20, that sort of thing. That, 5% or 20% chance, it's always there. You land the right punch, it can change the course of a fight. And we saw that tonight. That third round, getting off the deck and catching Joshua when they were exchanging wildly, that was the turning of the fight. Will the rematch be on Showtime or Fox? I wouldn't imagine so. It'll be on the same, whatever it was on for this fight. Just for the fact that, the rematch clauses, all that sort of stuff associated with it, likely to be all sewn up ahead of the fight anyway. It's, that's a contingency in the just in case, and now we're in the just in case. Jim Davis, I'm not surprised fast hands were the difference. Certainly did. We've got Coco saying something that appears to be in Russian or something. Philip Crew, does he want a rematch? He's no choice. Well, it'll be interesting. I mean, I haven't seen the post-fight, so I don't know if he was asked what's happening. I'm sure we're going to hear very shortly from Eddie Hearn at some point. He's in the cameras constantly, so maybe it'll take a week or two for him to actually, for Joshua to make up his mind about what he's doing and when. He may just want a little bit of time to decompress and get away from the limelight, and obviously after what is now considered one of the biggest upsets in heavyweight boxing history, he may need some time just to gather his thoughts about the what next. And I don't think it's unfair to say that this is one of the biggest heavyweight upsets of all time. Not a lot of people saw this coming. Sure, there were a few rabid Ruiz fanboys coming to channels like mine and saying to everyone, you don't know what you're talking about. But that was definitely the minority. Most people thought that it was going to end one way, with Joshua coming through, maybe having a few little troubles with Ruiz Jr., but getting the job done, possibly stopping him or taking it on points. But coming up with this, wow, it was a shock. It was incredible. Ruiz Jr., the unified heavyweight champion. I mean, how does that sound? I mean, did you ever think you'd be saying that at home if you're listening to me? Did you hear that? Did you think you'd ever be saying Andy Ruiz Jr., unified heavyweight champion? 3 of the 4 major titles plus the IBO too. Daniel says, hello man, and hello to you. Callum says, morning back to you. It'd be interesting, if you've watched this, did you, the fight I should say, not the stream, did you stay up all night, or was this something where you got up very early for this? Because if you've done an all-nighter, that certainly is full credit to you. Adrian says, think AJ may need a new trainer soon as well. He may have outgrown Rob. And that'll be one of the questions that's coming up. Has he actually outgrown Rob McCracken? There comes a point in a fighter's career where some of these questions do come up, especially after losses. Often what happens in a win is you can paper over some of the cracks, but in a loss, everything is exposed. And Joshua didn't look great out there tonight. Will Wilder still be interested in the Anthony fight even after this? Good question. I mean, my sort of take on this is just initially thinking about this. Is that Undisputed fight really, that is it out the window? I mean, not because of with Joshua, I just mean in general. That's been devalued immensely. It really has. Man, I'm losing track of the comments here. I was right up on it, and then, God, there's hundreds of them. Where did I get to? I'm going to just have to to start somewhere. I lost my place. I clicked on the screen. All of a sudden, I went somewhere else. But getting back to what I was saying, some people might sort of say that Joshua's sort of, lost his opportunity for the Undisputed fight, and we should have had that one too. But if they ever do fight, Wilder and Joshua, the value is not there anymore compared to what it was. This was a banana skin fight that's, it's happened. And one of these guys was, like I was saying for some time now, eventually one of these guys is going to lose to someone that we didn't expect. And this is the one that we didn't expect. So all of a sudden, what might have been a fight with hundreds of millions of dollars, I just don't know that it's worth that anymore. Because this is going to take wipe a lot of value off that. Where are we? I'm going to try to get back on the comments here. God, I'm so far behind. Just scrolling down. I'm going to try find it. I'm just going to have to go to a certain point here. So Iman says, I feel like McCracken isn't good for Joshua since he used to be faster and more explosive. Since WK, he's been a lot more cautious in his fights. Well, I think it's a case with Anthony Joshua and Rob McCracken that they're devising game plans based on the fighter, who they're fighting. Joshua's fought very different at various times. You saw a different, more cautious approach against Joseph Parker. But then against Alexander Povetkin, he was a bit more aggressive, and he spoke about being more aggressive. Where are we now? Eddie saying, well, great to see you live, mate. Yeah, that's only the second live I've ever done. But if there was ever a time to go live, this is it, I guess. Michael Cox says AJ fans are on suicide watch. Might be a slight exaggeration, but I imagine there will be some of the casual Anthony Joshua fan base that will be in some disbelief. I think, those who've been following boxing to any extent for, in a sort of more in the hardcore mold, but Joshua supporters, they're going to realise, and see this for what it is. It's an upset that the possibility was there, but it wasn't expected that Joshua had the pedigree to beat Ruiz, but ultimately came up short here. Fantastic effort by Ruiz. Will this do something to Anthony Joshua's profile? Will this see some of the casual support that he does receive? Because some fans who might see this and go, you were beaten by that guy. And might just sort of, because people dip in and dip out of boxing all the time, for whatever reason. I'm sure there's been different points, for some of you at least, where, you've dipped in and out of boxing over time, and sometimes you don't even realise when you've sort of dipped out. I mean, I'm reminded of, I used to be a massive NBA fan. I've followed that closely, at least for a decade. But more recently, maybe it's because, I sort of started the channel and that sort of things, but I just, didn't follow things to the same extent. And all of a sudden, you sort of dip out of it and you go, well, actually, I'm probably a casual fan of that now. But this could do something for Joshua's support, but I think the second fight, a rematch, it's a tasty proposition now, isn't it? Andy Ruiz Jr. is no joke. This is going to be something we're going to really be looking forward to. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the sanctioning bodies, because Anthony Joshua had a whole bundle of mandatories backing up, and they've been piling up for a little while. So you've got the WBO, which is scheduled to be next. You've got the IBF, and then you have the WBA, which will just be around the corner. I mean, they'd sort of push theirs out to, it's effectively every 18 months, but that will come around quickly. Getting back to the comments, round 4, I want to know AJ's punch stats. Must be under 10 thrown. Yeah, round 4, round 5, both very low volume, but not just for Joshua, but also for Ruiz. It was very low volume stuff. It was outside of the rounds where there was the knockdowns, and possibly even round 6 where there's some good body work by Ruiz. Very low volume stuff. And that was part of the surprise that I had heading into round 6, or partway through that. I was looking at Joshua thinking, he looks like he's starting to gas quite badly, and by the end of that round, really sort of ragged breathing. And I did a tweet at the time saying that he was looking really tired. And yeah, it wasn't too long after that in the 7th round where it was over. So Callum says, Ruiz rushed AJ Mike Tyson style. I wouldn't say in those first couple of rounds. I mean, he was tracking forward, stalking Joshua, but Joshua moving around for the most part, keeping him at range. It was that moment in the third where he traded with Joshua after Joshua thought he was hurt from the knockdown that, that was something that really turned the fight. Pivotal moment in the fight, and maybe a key mistake for Joshua. After that, the second knockdown, he looked shot. Didn't look good in those next few rounds, and ultimately worn down, worn out, taken out. So Mike Up says AJ has a blemish on his record, and a lot of people are going to point the finger at McCracken. Always the trainer's fault. Well, that is a good point. Might hear something in the background. There's a car blaring past. It's quite funny on this house that I've moved to just a few months ago. People drive. It doesn't seem to be anywhere else that I've lived in this area that I've lived in for about 10 years now. On this street, people just drive with the window down with the corniest music. I don't know if it's a thing or something, but it seems to be, from what I've ascertained in the first few months of being here. Anyway, getting back to it. Yeah, Rob McCracken. I mean, there is the question there, but there's also a valid question to say, if Joshua can't respond to the instruction, is it the right instruction? I mean, it's sort of a loss exposes the bad parts of, any fighter's fight plan, preparations. They are more closely examined than they would have been in a win. And sometimes, you can get away with things and still win. But a loss, you really have to be more honest and assess the situation. Bruce Vane says AJ too heavy. Maybe. That's, that's up for debate. But you can certainly argue that, he never recovered after being hurt in the third round. I think that's pretty clear that, dropped twice in the third round. After that, it was all to do for Joshua. He couldn't get his legs back under him. Never quite looked the same. Never settled into his work as we might have expected. But yeah, Ruiz, hell of a fight. Makes me excited for Parker comeback, which supposedly is going to be against Eric Molina, which I've put a request into UCAD about because he's under a UCAD ban. So I want to know if he can actually fight Eric Molina. Wasn't in the official press release, but yeah, we'll see. So Howard Simmons says Wilder would have destroyed Ruiz. I mean, easy to say if they don't fight. I mean, people thought that, a lot of people thought that Ruiz was going to get destroyed in the round. There were a lot of people who were coming to preview videos that I was doing saying that Joshua was going to knock out Ruiz in, 1, 2, 3 rounds. I thought it was going, if Joshua was going to win, he's going to have to work a lot harder than 1 or 2, 3 rounds. I thought it was a case he'd have to break him down. Ultimately, the weight of punishment might, soften Ruiz up to get knocked out. But clearly it was the other way around. Ian Serrano says all AJ had to do was use the jab and he walked into it. He did use the jab at times to good effect early on. That was how he was. I gave him the first, was it 1 or the 2 first rounds, and that was largely off the back of the jab, which I thought did have some snap to it at times. But I guess when he was recovering and, obviously a bit fatigued from those exchanges, the jab sort of went out the window a bit. Alan Ryan says Ruiz victory gives Parker's close win more credit now that the rematch would be an interesting between AJ and Ruiz. Yeah, I think Parker gets some more credit here. Ben D says he quit, referring to Joshua. I think he was buying for time. I don't know if he was trying to quit. I think he was trying to be a bit too cute with the referee. Didn't respond to the instruction. The referee was like not having it. Ruiz used his experience when he went down, took his time getting up. That says Jim Davis. Yeah, he did. He, obviously was flat into the canvas, but he did take his time. Didn't rush getting up. Didn't look terribly hurt. And obviously he wasn't terribly hurt because he was able to battle back right in the next flurry, catch Joshua. G.G. Allen, Joshua did respond though. Wayne Towers says AJ spat his mouthpiece out before he got up and the ref called it off. He didn't want to be in there, and I reckon he underestimated Ruiz. Maybe he did. Maybe that has... the next comment here, Hitman Boxing was straight up irate. About what? Ruiz winning? Or Joshua losing? Or what? I haven't seen that video. Callum Bush, Parker can take Wilder maybe. Who knows? I mean, this whole thing shakes up the heavyweight division. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. This, it was a hell of a fight. It really was. Ruiz Jr. coming in with one of the biggest upsets ever. Not a lot of people saw it coming. Maybe Joshua did overlook him. But this really throws the cat amongst the pigeons for the heavyweight division. There may be the rematch, there may not be. But for now, after what's been a pretty dour sort of 2019, it hasn't exactly been a world of sort of... It hasn't really been a classic 2019, I want to say, for the heavyweight division. It's been largely a whole bunch of mismatches and not much to look forward to. There's a whole bundle of fights coming up in July that are, most of them are pretty competitive matchups. There's been a couple of fights, earlier in the year, Bryant Jennings and Oscar Rivas in January. But apart from that, we've been kind of just treading our feet, waiting for something to happen. And this has really come out of the blue here. And, it shows you anything can happen in the heavyweight division. You land that one punch, and that can change a fight. And we saw that with Ruiz. Caught Joshua, changed the fight. Martin says, loads of factors, haven't fought since September, always struggled against smaller man, White, Povetkin, Takam, fighting first time outside of UK, underestimated, overlooked Ruiz, never had his chin tested. Well, I think he's had his chin tested, but this was a case, I think, Ruiz was able to capitalise on that first knockdown. Whereas some of the other guys that he's fought, that when Joshua's sort of either been rocked or been in trouble, been on the canvas against Vlad didn't really sort of pressure him like Ruiz did after he had him down the first time. We've seen that Joshua can be hit before and hurt, but, has anyone jumped on him like Ruiz did the second time around? He did, and, I thought Joshua was gone after that second knockdown. Looked like he was about to fall through the ropes and barely got up. Saved by the bell, as they say. Ultimately, Ruiz ended up getting the job done. But, that was a contrast because he jumped on him after the first knockdown, but in the next couple of rounds, it was pretty sedate, circumspect stuff, but he may have been a bit fatigued himself. So, Farstar's dad, Parker versus Wilder, low you guys want to kill Parker. Well, I mean, Parker's got one of the best chins in the heavyweight division. Johan Dorper was able to take Deontay Wilder's power. That was waved off late. Deontay Wilder didn't drop Johan Dorper. I think, Parker's chin, and there's a few others. After this performance, I think Andy Ruiz Jr., his chin has well and truly been checked. Someone like Ruiz Jr. versus Wilder, if his chin can stand up to Anthony Joshua's power, you got to, give him a better shot against Wilder. I mean, styles make fights as well. You can't just sort of say because one guy beat one guy that another guy will beat another or can't beat another. So, Deontay Wilder, as we've seen before, he is a vulnerable fighter to some extent, but so too is Anthony Joshua. These guys are not immune from taking a punch and getting rocked and getting hurt. Luis Ortiz almost had Wilder out of there. As we saw, Ruiz Jr. hurt Wilder, but he did get him out of there. Bendy, Parker has poor head movement. Wilder will take it off. Actually, Parker's got a pretty good defense. So the actual stats don't back up what you're saying there. Parker did better against Ruiz. Well, I mean, that sort of underlines what I'm saying. Styles make fights. Whole triangles of, fighters, this guy against this guy, doesn't always work. And a whole bunch of other factors fall in behind, what was happening in the build-up. Other factors like that come into a performance. And we don't know if there was anything that was happening in the background, but, questions will be asked about. Was, Anthony Joshua fully focused on Andy Ruiz Jr.? Did he underestimate him? And, I mean, on the weight of what we saw, Joshua didn't perform that well. Ruiz did. He deserves that win. Credible win. Incredible win, I should say. Adrian, the Wildettes are out in full force, I see. Well, I mean, I'm sure fanboys of all sorts of different fighters are going to be either relishing this or sort of ruining the missed opportunity that was. Callum Bush, classic Rocky versus Drago. One is super motivated, the other doing too much media. Well, you may see in future with Joshua's fights, if this is identified as something that there was too much media commitments and other things associated with the fight, the build-up stuff, well, maybe they will change what's happening. If they do believe, because remember, I think it was Ronda Rousey basically went ghost in the second build-up to her fight with Nunes, and that still didn't help her. Sometimes it is just, someone has your number. And that's not to say Joshua can't beat Ruiz. It'll be a very interesting rematch, but I think a lot more people are going to be giving Ruiz a lot more credit after this performance. He is now the unified heavyweight champion. So we'll go down to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to skip past some of these, drop down some comments, that some stuff you want me to talk about. I'm going to skip right to the start here. So rematch will give Ruiz 20 million plus. It'll be interesting to see what was in the contract. We don't know. I mean, maybe it is just a guaranteed number. Might be double whatever he got for this fight. It's hard to say. Really, when he makes money is when he has the belts outright. I think, as we've seen and heard before from Dillian Whyte, that Anthony Joshua was demanding the lion's share in a rematch. So that may be the case here. He may still be getting the lion's share in a rematch with Ruiz. Wallace says, "This is a day I will never forget. Love you all from Australia. Blaze it up." Salty Sally, won $190. Thanks, Andy. I think you said the other day you put $10 down, didn't you? So that was 19-1. That's a pretty decent little payout there. Mike T, Adam Fahey, double that. Ruiz will make 20 million plus. We've got main event boxing talk. Main event boxing talk. Joshua is finished. I don't think one loss defines your career. This could be something that makes Anthony Joshua, or it could be something that breaks him. We're going to have to see what he does now, because I think, it remains to be seen where Anthony Joshua is going to go next. Is he going to take the rematch immediately? I don't know. I didn't see the post-fight interview. I don't know if he was asked that, or if in fact he was interviewed. AJ isn't the WBO mandatory. I'm not sure who that's in response to. So Grayler says he can't beat Ruiz. Ruiz is better than AJ. Well, he was tonight. That doesn't mean he can't win a rematch. I think we've seen with upsets in the past. I think even if you look at Lennox Lewis, he had a couple of notable upsets on his record. He was able to come back and tidy it up. So it'll be the mark of, and the making potentially, of Joshua as a fighter and part of his legacy if he can come back and respond in a rematch. But maybe Ruiz has got his number. I mean, we'll have to see. Comments are coming thick and fast here. These late replacement fights are always banana skins. Not always, but it's never ideal to come in at prepare for a new opponent at short notice. Greater says, did you see AJ had a neck injury before the fight? Wasn't aware of any neck injury. I did see that mark on his sort of left cheek, and there was some speculation about that, but that could have been from hard sparring. So Ed Tutul, Pulev versus for the vacant IBF. Pulev is still the mandatory as far as I understand it. Adam Fahey, I don't think the UK pay-per-view figures will be massive. Once AJ has lost, he won't, in my opinion, do 1 million. And don't see it selling out Wembley. The large stadium fights are filled with 85% casual fans. Yeah, there could be a hit to Joshua's commercial value here from this loss. But also it does sort of set up pretty decent interest in a rematch. But will they want to run this in the United States? Is this a case of... Because there is a potential narrative that could be written that if he goes back to the UK, some fans will say, and commentators, that he's going back home fighting where he's comfortable. There is something to be said about tidying up what some will see as a mess in the place that it happened. I wouldn't mind seeing another Joshua and Ruiz fight at the Garden or somewhere else in America. What is Miller thinking? Very good question. That he ripped up his lottery ticket. He's probably, I'm going to check out his Instagram at some point. But, Miller can't really say a lot. He's only got himself to blame. AJ met a junkyard dog and got mauled. That's from Mala2243. Greater, they were working on his neck before the fight. Okay. Are you sure it wasn't just massaging? It could have been just trying to loosen it up. I haven't heard anything of a neck injury, but that's not to say that it didn't happen. Mike T says, what do you think Rob McCracken gave Joshua bad advice telling him to pick up the pace? I think it was a mistake. Joshua started the rounds fast, but clearly had an empty tank. Well, yeah, Joshua wasn't really responding to a lot of the instruction, though, at the same time. He was visibly gassed, but some of that was from the knockdown, too. He didn't look too bad in the first couple of rounds, but it was, very low volume and feeling out stuff, and maybe it's a bit hard to analyse Joshua or McCracken for some of what one was doing that the other couldn't, or whatever, just because, Joshua was hurt badly in that third round. Ruiz did a number on him. I thought Joshua was done at the end of the third round, that he wasn't going to, really recover from that. And ultimately, I thought coming into the fourth round, he looked better than I was expecting. And he did sort of look to start getting his legs back under him. But Ruiz, the body work in the sixth softened him up and really started to put it on him again in the seventh. And yeah, Andy Ruiz Jr., the Destroyer, lived up to the name, certainly did. I thought Ruiz blew it, allowing Joshua to recover in the fourth. Yeah, I was talking about that earlier. It was interesting in the fourth and the fifth, just how low volume and sedate it was, but that may speak to Ruiz was also feeling the pace, and maybe he knew that with what he'd done against Joshua, that he had the power to hurt him, and he was backing himself to do it again, and he just needed a little bit of time to just get a bit more recovery and gas in his tank to launch another assault. Ultimately he did. Joseph Bacon says, like Sanders or Samuel Peters, you can have a shoulder-rolling, heavy, quick slugger, just wreck the taller guys. Like people say, everyone Ruiz probably spars is taller. He was ready. And Ruiz had been sparring taller guys. He was sparring Alexander Flores. I saw that on Flores's Instagram page, and I'm not sure who else he was working with. But yeah, Ruiz being one of the smaller heavyweights, and yeah, he's listed at 6'2", but I'm a little bit doubtful he is. Maybe 6'1" at best. Most of the guys in the division, even the ones that are sort of considered I don't want to say average height, but it seems to be about 6'4". A lot of guys are around there, and then you get a bunch of guys at about 6'5", and then the real tall timber starts kicking in from 6'6". So he's always been fighting guys like, Anthony Joshua in terms of height. It's not a new thing. He's always fighting up and having to, be the guy with a smaller reach and overcoming some of those obstacles. And he showed that, wasn't a problem. Joshua should fight Char. Or Char has a fight coming up with Trevor Bryan. They've got about 20 days to actually get that made and on. And I'm picking Trevor Bryan to win that. I think Manuel Char never really had a lot in his arsenal, and I think Trevor Bryan, a big puncher, should be able to knock out Manuel Char. I mean, Char's been knocked out by a cruiserweight before, so if Trevor Bryan has anything in his arsenal, he should be able to take him out. Stephen B says Ruiz will lose the IBF if he rematches. That certainly could be a situation. Happened to Tyson Fury. D. Beer says, yeah, but LL don't get the crap kicked out of him. Not sure what that's in relation to. LL? Simple Boy, at Adam, the pay-per-view will be over 1.5 million at a rematch. Certainly will be a lot of interest in a rematch. I think just in general, Andy Ruiz Jr., his stardom is going to be taking up. You're going to be picking up. You're going to see a lot of Andy Ruiz Jr. in the next days and weeks through the media. He's really clipped his ticket. Not only is he going to get a multi-million-dollar rematch, if he can manage to stop Joshua, win the second fight or whatever, that is, you're starting to talk big-time paydays for Ruiz. He might be locked into some deal where he gets X amount for the rematch, but if he can hold on to the belts, he's going to get a massive payday. It's the lottery ticket. He's cashed it, and now he's the unified champion of the world. We have True 2022 saying he wanted rematch 100%. Okay, that's good. So we're going to be talking rematch. I hadn't caught the post-fight, so I wasn't sure on that. I raced straight into doing my post-fight review, which is up on the channel. And then I thought, if there's any time to go live, because this is only the second time that I've gone live, over 100 people in the chat at the moment, so thank you for joining me. It's been a little bit higher as well. Smash that thumbs up button if you can. Really appreciate it, you being here with me on the Boxing Squared YouTube channel. Hope you've enjoyed the pre-fight content and the content on the channel in general. So Muller2243 says, Mike T, good on you. Not sure what that's about. Jason Landers, AJ looked green before the fight. Green as in just getting off a roller coaster. Well, maybe it was the pressure. Maybe there's some circumstance we're not aware of here that's kicked in. It's hard to sort of say. Boxing Squared, keep up the good work on the videos. Thank you, Grayler. Katie Taylor lost that fight. Poor Pursoon. Man, now that was a really interesting fight. Pursoon just relentless. I was expecting her to slow down and for Taylor to take on, but sort of come on and later in the fight, but it was the other way around. Taylor looking okay in the first part of the fight, but not dominating, and Pursoon really starting to put it on her, and Katie Taylor was starting to look a little bit ragged in the second half of that fight. I'm not sure where I've gone here on the chat. But yeah, I was surprised by the decision. I could make a case for a draw, but I don't think I can make a case for a Katie Taylor win. I thought Bassoon won that, but yeah, it's boxing. It happens, I guess. Where are we here in the chat? Teddy B says, I'm still in pure shock, man. I think a lot of people will be. There's going to be some people who decided, not to get the pay-per-view because of the early time, who are going to wake up and hear the news and be like, what? What's just happened? So Matthew Morlinson says, made 25 quid off $2.50. I knew this was AJ's Douglas. Well, that Douglas and Tyson one became... people say, it was this Buster Douglas moment. There's going to be a new moniker coming out of this one, because this is one of the biggest upsets in heavyweight boxing history. That, people might start saying, he might get Ruized or something like that. Andy Ruiz Jr. coming off the canvas, dropping and ultimately stopping Anthony Joshua in the 7th round. Incredible stuff. Andy Ruiz Jr., 3 of the 4 major titles, plus the IBO. So we've got Kiwi 007 body shots got AJ. Certainly in that 6th round, it was starting to take effect. You could see Joshua wincing, not liking it. Tommy Bermudez says Lewis won 2nd fight against Ruckman. Yeah. I mean, he was upset a couple of times in his career. He got the win in the rematches, so it's not to say that Joshua can't go away, can't analyse the performance, can't make adjustments. It's not to say he can't do that. So I think, with a few days and weeks just to reflect on what's happened here, they'll go away if there's a rematch. They're going to make a plan to beat Ruiz. They'll have a full camp for Ruiz. We shouldn't just write Anthony Joshua off. He is still an elite fighter. This fight doesn't make him not an elite fighter. Brad says, did you see Ruiz got tips off Parker before this? I did see that little clip outside where they were talking a few different things. And Ruiz told Parker about it was caught on camera about the weight that he wanted to come in heavier, that he didn't want to, because it was interesting. A month or so ago when the fight was made, he was talking about, if I'm at 245, no one can stop me. And then he weighed in at 268. So I think a lot of people were like, okay, well, that's significantly more. And when he was asked about, well, have you been doing weights? Because Parker said, have you hit the gym, hit the weights? And he said no, but he didn't want to lose any weight. He wanted to feel comfortable with the weight and have as much behind his punches to really put it on Anthony Joshua. And you got to say, with what's happened in this fight, getting the win here, that's paid off. Okay, next comment. Michael Woodward, well, glad to catch you live. Only the 2nd time I've ever been live. So Michael again says, I called it. Yeah, a number of people did call it. I don't think many people really expected it, but yeah, shocker for Joshua, but, delight for Andy Ruiz Jr. Mala2243, I was surprised by how ineffective AJ's jab was. It looked good in spots, but it wasn't always, that sort of crisp ramrod jab that was seen in the past. Occasionally he was snapping it out there and it looked good. So Tommy says, Fury next to get exposed by Tom Schwartz. I can't say I'm expecting that, but, given what we've seen, maybe you can't rule off Tom Schwartz. Yeah, he's been sparring a couple of guys, actually. Alexander Zakozy, he's 6'9", a legit 6'9", and I'm a little bit, I still question Fury's claim to being 6'9", because you see him in different photos. Like, he was with Magic Johnson, who's a legit 6'9". This was just a week or so ago. And Johnson looked to be 2 inches taller. Yeah, I think Fury is like 6'7", 6'7.5" or whatever. But Alexander Zakozy, big tall mover. He's been sparring Tom Schwartz. And I saw just the other day on social media, Marius Wok has also been sparring with Tom Schwartz. And this is in Las Vegas. But I was kind of a little surprised to see that Tom Schwartz had, and you may have seen this in my heavyweight news and brief video from the other day, just posting a whole bunch of food, and not all of it good, that he's been eating on his travels to Vegas, either on the plane or since arriving in Vegas. And it was just like, is he taking this seriously? But, I'm sort of more heartened since he's posted clips of him running in the desert, sparring with Wok and all that sort of stuff. Simple Boy says, AJ didn't listen from the first round. Yeah, he didn't seem to be able to respond to some of McCracken's instructions, and very keen to throw those hooks. Did you notice that in those early rounds? Really looking to throw those hooks, and McCracken was telling him, just stop it. Don't throw those hooks. You don't need to jump out with a lead left hook. The hooks will come later on. You just work behind the jab, open everything up from the jab. But, he was in love with trying to throw the hooks. Obviously, he's seen and, thought something in the build-up to this that Andy Ruiz was going to be prone to a hook and he was going to stop him. And he did land it at different points in the fight. Unrivaled boxing talk and news. Hey, Boxing Squared. Hey, back to you too. Michael Woodward, glad the fraud's exposed. He had no defense like most Euro Wilder would have killed him. Well, it would have been good if we could see that fight already. I don't think Josh was a fraud. He's still a very good fighter. I think people who are going to go in on Joshua and say that he's nothing, that sort of downplays Ruiz's win here. It was a great win by Andy Ruiz Jr. Clark too. Hey, bro, you're solid, man. Fire. Thank you. D-Bear, this fight makes me question how AJ would face against Luis Ortiz, who hits harder than Ruiz. Well, comparisons about who hits harder, hard to say, hard to compare. Someone like Joseph Parker had said Ruiz Jr. was the guy that hit him the hardest that he's ever been hit. But yeah, if that fight had been made at short notice, it would have been a really interesting fight. I think that's because Ortiz, even though he is clearly a little bit on the slide, he is still, a very good heavyweight fighter. Still got currency in the heavyweight division. A win over Luis Ortiz still does mean something. And Anthony Joshua knows that, and that's part of the reason that he wanted to face him. Adam Fahey, Marla, 2243, Andy's head movement and pressure made AJ's jab more a flick out there rather than the normal ramrod. Yeah, some of Ruiz's head movement, especially early on, very good. Very good. But what I was really impressed with was under pressure, Ruiz, demonstrated a lot of patience. He didn't get flustered. He actually rose to the occasion and he put it back on Anthony Joshua, was able to pressure Joshua, put him in a tricky situation and ultimately, paid off. Full credit to Andy Ruiz Jr. This is a great win. At the risk of sort of repeating different things, because I don't really know when people have sort of dropped into the stream and sort of, what you've heard or not. This was a magnificent, win for Andy Ruiz Jr. You can't understate, this is one of the biggest shocks in heavyweight boxing history. And this is going to go down in sporting, myth and lore and legend about what's happened here. Much as, Mike Tyson being upset by Buster Douglas. And there will be some who are quick to sort of say that Anthony Joshua is, not an elite fighter, but that downplays how good Andy Ruiz Jr. is. And I think, maybe the making of Anthony Joshua will be in a rematch. A loss might be the best thing that happens for his career. We will have to see. These things you don't know. But, Joshua, he may be able to regroup and get his titles back. We shall see. So Kiwi 007 says, got my prediction well wrong, wallet empty. I think a lot of people lost money on this, but maybe the bookies lost even more. They had Ruiz Jr. at long odds. All the glitz, all the glamour of America made him soft. He should have been in the woods running away from grizzly bears rather than sightseeing. That's from Callum Bush. Well, if there is anything that they did wrong with this camp that they can identify, you can bet your bottom dollar that they're going to rectify it and make changes and adjustments for a rematch. Katie Taylor lost that fight, Paul Pursoon. Well, I covered that before. I agree with you. Oh, so this is part of where I lost my spot before. So I've done some of these comments. Tommy says, money saps hunger from fighters. And maybe the success, the glitz, the glamour, being at the top of the tree, sleeping on silk sheets, as they say, maybe that had taken some of Joshua's hunger. Maybe this is something that lights the fire with under him. Andy Ruiz Jr. is now the guy with 3 titles. He was hungry for this victory. Said he was going to shock the world, and now he did. Now it's going to be about maintaining what he's got. He will know that Joshua in a rematch is, no easy proposition. He won't be underestimating Joshua at all, and I don't think anyone else should be. Joshua coming off this loss might be very, very dangerous, like a wounded animal. Salty Sally says it'll be strange to see Joshua in the monthly rankings again. Good point. Very good point. It was strange when Vladimir Klitschko lost to Fury at the back end of 2015, sort of seeing him in different rankings. It was odd after such a long hiatus. Money in the rematch. Not sure what that means, but it'll be a pretty big rematch. Possibly a bigger one. Oh, Lennox Lewis, LL. Okay, you were referring to that before. Yeah, Lennox Lewis tidied up his defeat, so it's not to say that Joshua can't. Michael Woodward says he better stay far from Wilder. Well, that super fight, it might be over now. This might not be something that we will never see again. That we'll never see at all, I should say. The value from that may just be gone from that now. You know, they were building towards a massive, massive super fight, undisputed. You know, even if Joshua gets his belts back, the money may never be quite there anymore. So it might be one of these situations. Joshua's loss doesn't just affect him. It affects others. Might affect the value of a Tyson Fury fight with Joshua. Certainly for me, it affects the value of a Deontay Wilder fight. I think, you know, there might be less demand from casuals for it. A lot of people might side with Wilder now. I still think that sort of fight, because, you know, Wilder's technical frailties, you know, not great there, but he's got that power, the equalizer. And Joshua is a hard hitter, and if he hit Wilder the same as he hit Andy Ruiz Jr., would Wilder have got up from that? You know, it's all open questions. For me, I still think that's a very competitive fight. I've been saying for a long time it's a 50-50 fight. Maybe it comes down to whoever lands, you know, first and lands hardest. It could be one of those things. I mean, Ruiz Jr. proved as soon as he clocked Anthony Joshua in that third round, you know, it was very hard for Joshua to recover. Unrivaled boxing talk and news. Should Ruiz get a Snickers? You know you're not when you're hungry. I think, you know, Ruiz Jr., who's been sort of pushing for that for some time, he probably is going to get some sort of commercial deal from Snickers out of this. He's been giving them free publicity for months now, well ahead of this Joshua fight. Oh, I lost my place in the chat. I clicked one little button, all of a sudden it just rolls down the hill here. Where are we? Kelly lost as well. Yeah, I didn't catch all of that fight, but yeah, certainly he was gassing towards the end. Ray Robinson came better than advertised, or was it that Josh Kelly isn't as good as people think? It's a question. True says Josh Kelly was lucky to get a draw too. Mr. Ruski. Adam, where are we here? Joshua is a bum. He was a hype job. No, I don't agree with that. I mean, he never would have gone as far as he has and beaten some of the opposition that he has if he was a bum. Sometimes a fighter has your number on the night. All, you know, a whole bunch of factors can, you know, run in their favor. And if, you know, some of your build-up wasn't ideal or whatever, or you fight wrong in the night, your tactics weren't quite right, I think we can, you know, you make an argument that a fatal error for this fight was as soon as he dropped Ruiz Jr. in that third round, Joshua thought that Ruiz was done and he was there for the taking. Ruiz Jr. proved he wasn't that hurt. He was able to clip Joshua, and, you know, that was really the beginning of the end. You know, that third round knockdown. If he'd have been a bit more cautious, backed off, and, you know, just sort of been a bit more cautious there, who knows what would have happened. So Walker Sam says, I'm disappointed with British fans. They were salty even when Joshua said about support Ruiz. They care only about bets. Do you mean belts? I'm not sure what you're getting at there. Grayler, I got pay-per-view because I didn't want to miss the upset. Big Boys Boxing certainly gives the heavyweight division a shot of life. Yeah, shakes it up. This isn't a bad thing. May not be a bad thing for Joshua in the long run either. Coming off a loss, learning about, you know, a whole bunch of things. They might be able to rectify some things that have gone unfixed. You know, a win always, you know, can paper over some cracks here. You know, a loss does expose everything. Well and truly, that you go, okay, we need to examine what didn't work. So Robin Rickson says Wilder doesn't get his $100 million fight now. He's contracted to 1 to 2 million fights for the rest of his career. Poor guy. It probably does devalue, you know, that fight. You know, hard to say what it's worth. But I don't think maybe the interest or the commercial sort of oomph that would have been there will be there. You know, a loss does a lot. You know, it's not to say that, you know, it's one of these things that Joshua is, you know, doesn't mean because he lost that he's done. He can well and truly come back. But there will be a process that he has to come back by, and that'll take time. Is that fight ever going to happen, a Joshua Wilder fight, let alone for Undisputed, but just in general, even if one of them doesn't have a belt? I'm not so convinced. I mean, they could have and should have fought by now. We needed that fight. Didn't happen. So, yeah, it is what it is. Adam Fahey says, Kelly thinks if he fought in the UK, he would win easy from tonight's performance. Well, young Joshua, that is what the Paul Matchroom have on home soil. Yeah, I didn't think Josh Kelly looked great from what I saw. Mala2243 says, Big Boys Boxing, she was robbed. Obviously referring to Pursoon. Yeah, she put up a great fight. Even the Sky commentary team and others around ringside thought Pursoon, either won, or it was at very worst, a draw. I didn't see a case for Katie Taylor winning that fight. I can make a case for the draw, but, it is what it is, I guess. D. Bearer says, Lewis never got beat up like AJ did. Yeah, good point. But, they're not exactly the same fighters, are they? Michael Woodward, Wilder runs through the heavyweight division. Well, if he is going to run through the heavyweight division, let's see it. We can't forget, he spent the better part of his championship career fighting guys we didn't want him to see. I mean, that might hurt some people's feelings, but guys like Molina, Spilker, Duopa, Chris Areola, Gerald Washington, some of those guys, fights he probably shouldn't have been in. Could have made a run a lot earlier, but he's doing what he needs to now, fighting guys like Fury, Ortiz. This, it was long overdue. And on the strength of this, I mean, does Deontay Wilder go to number one of the heavyweight fighters, or is it Tyson Fury? I think people will say after this loss that Joshua drops down. And where do we rank Andy Ruiz Jr. now? Is he a top 5 fighter now? Is he a top 3 fighter? Tell me. Okay, I'm going to scroll down to, there's just so many comments. I'm sorry for missing some of this. I'm going to scroll down to catch up. Scott70 says, Joshua was a manufactured champ. Sounds like the heavyweight division all over. H2O, Joshua was holding the belts hostage. The heavyweight division is great again. Good riddance. I think that's a little bit tough. I mean, Joshua's been fighting pretty decent opposition. Luke Bashian, Wilder would have finished Ruiz. People need to realise that and stop throwing excuses just because AJ lost. AJ will bounce back and beat Ruiz, but I have doubts that he can beat Fury or Wilder. And I think a lot of people will have those same doubts now. I mean, a lot of people thought AJ's chin was chin-checked after the Vladimir Klitschko fight, but being dropped by Andy Ruiz Jr. 4 times in this fight, some people may not, be as, they'll have some questions about the sturdiness of Joshua's chin. Ruiz Jr. coming into this, his KO ratio was about 66%, something like that. 32 fights, 21 knockouts. Not exactly noted as one of the division's bigger punches. And he did catch and hurt Joshua multiple times in this fight. Eman99, AJ was getting tagged way too much in the fight. Makes me think the Wilder fight wouldn't end well for him. And this is, some of what McCracken was pointing to between the rounds. He was saying, look, don't fight so small. You need to, use your height and reach. That was after, I think, the first or second round. He was actively talking about use your height and reach. You should be using these advantages. And at times he gave it up. Six Brass says, do you think fighting 2:30am, 3am UK might have thrown him off? He looked tired. Well, it's hard to say. I mean, could have been a fact. I don't know. He had been acclimatizing in Miami for a few weeks, but is the time difference, 4, 5, 6 hours? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, a lot of, we're going to be analyzing these things and looking at all the different factors to, what led to a loss, but doesn't change the result. Ruiz Jr., massive upset, deserved it. Charlene says he will bounce back and be more cautious. H2O, hype plus fraud equals AJ. Donald Bauer, Callum Smith sure looks sharp. He's the real deal. He did look sharp, but I mean, I have to temper some of my expectation was against Hassan Dam, who was, a cruiserweight coming up to super middleweight. He looked good. He looked like a giant in there. And that left hook, that catch and shoot, was incredible. Solo rated temp. People claim robbery too often, but at this time, Delphine was definitely robbed. Yeah, I don't know if I'd call it a robbery because it was a close fight. I can make a case for a draw. I couldn't make a case for Taylor winning. If anything, it should have been 96-94 the other way, but definitely very close. Unrivaled boxing talk and news. AJ looked like Bruno for me. And there's going to be those comparisons coming out, that he's looking a bit stiff and people saying a bit too muscle bound. I mean, was always going to happen at some point. Joshua was going to lose. And I guess people will be looking at the performance going, why wasn't he performing the way that, people expected him to? That, they know he can. And, the whole confluence of factors led to that performance. But, the turning of the fight was in round 3 where he gambled on trying to finish Ruiz, and ultimately it, came up snake eyes for him, and Ruiz turned the fight. So Hyper says, why did Ruiz let AJ take a break during round 3? Round 3, or do you mean round 4? Scott 70, Ruiz with a proper camp will beat Joshua. Yeah, and it goes the same way for Ruiz Jr. Having a full camp for Anthony Joshua, he will be able to tweak a few different things that he may, with a longer camp be able to do. So it's not just one way that Joshua has, the extra time to plan for Ruiz, but it's, it's the same, when you reverse it. Luke says, AJ didn't show that dog he showed versus White. His fake good boy persona has actually entered the boxing ring, and he looked too friendly while getting battered. His boxing IQ was low. Yeah, maybe the boxing IQ question will come up because he was asking between rounds, what was happening, what did he need to do, what was Ruiz going to do. And yeah, it didn't seem to be with the fast hands and Andy Ruiz's quickness that he was adapting very well in the ring there. Grayla says, Ruiz ate some big punches and countered. How do you beat a guy like that if your footwork is trash like Joshua? Parker and Fury can beat Ruiz. Well, Parker did beat Ruiz. Controversial fight, though. Marla says, Luke, you don't know Wilder will KO Ruiz. Debia says, AJ's been here in the States for weeks. That would be really poor planning if that were the case. Come on. Yeah, that's one of those things. I always question when fighters, I think, was it Richard Larty arrived in the UK about 1 or 2 days before he was due to fight Joe Joyce, and that's an extreme example of leaving it too late. There were issues with his visa, but it was still going to be at 4 or 5 days at best. Joshua did have time to acclimatise, but, they're going to put the microscope on his camp, the planning, whatever's happened to work out, was there something that went wrong here in the build-up? Was Joshua overtrained? He does have these incredibly long camps. So, I've always thought that, that could lead to, someone like a Joseph Parker, they've done all sorts of different length camps, and they've, found out that 12 weeks is too long for Parker, that about 7 or 8 or 9, was it 9? I think it was 9, was about optimal, that if you went 12, it'd be too long. But some of these guys, didn't Kubrat Pulev, the first time he was going to fight Joshua, he wanted 4 months. That seems like an incredibly long time for a camp. But I guess, these sort of fights, sometimes they only come around once. You don't get the opportunity again, or it'll take years and years to get back there. Mr. Miniature, Boxing Square, do you think AJ needs to get another trainer to work on movement and stamina? Well, there's always been questions about Joshua's stamina. And if you're going to get hurt, it's... if you're going to get hurt... sorry, I just saw another comment here. Organics herbal supplements, am I blocked? No, you're not. I can see your comment. I've been struggling with some of the comments here in terms of, and click on the screen, all of a sudden it just scrolls up like 30 or 40 comments, and it's hard to go back and find my place here. Hundreds of comments coming through. Getting back to Mr. Miniature's question, does he need to find a new trainer? That's a question naturally fans are going to ask. Is it completely fair on Rob McCracken? Maybe not, but that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be asked. One of those questions where, it's natural to come up. Is it a case that he's reached his peak with McCracken? Can he take him any further? Can he rectify some of these things I think we've been talking about? I think Joshua has been getting better. He has been a work in progress through his career. A lot of these guys have been. Deontay Wilder has been getting better through his championship career. There does come a point, though, where you have to ask the question, is a fighter maxed out with a certain trainer? Or do they need to make other changes within their camp? They've been doing things a certain way. For a rematch, they're going to examine all these things. Tommy, he's too robotic for a smaller, faster fighter. Well, Ruiz Jr.'s hands were good. I didn't think his feet were especially fast. But yeah, the hand speed was certainly troubling Joshua. AJ not beating any of the top fighters. Well, hasn't he beaten a whole bundle of them so far in his career? I mean, it's one loss. One loss doesn't mean that someone is all of a sudden trash. Super 34. It's not over for AJ. He's been a great champion for the real boxing fans. I'm sure a lot of people will agree with that sentiment. Charlene, was it wise he gave up in his corner, or should he have continued? Well, I mean, it was a little strange, the ending. It really was. I mean, he was trying to play for time. The referee wasn't going to have it. He, walked away after when he was being given the count, sort of up in the corner. He was trying to bide for time. The referee was like, no. Nah. I mean, you got to consider that was the fourth knockdown as well in the fight. The referee's also considering Joshua's welfare. And I think at that point as well, I mean, the writing was on the wall. It looked like it was going to be over in the third round. So Trev says AJ has got to get his focus back on boxing, forget the commercial stuff and be more active, 3 or 4 fights a year. Well, the activity, only having been active, September last year, and this is his first fight since, wasn't ideal, but he did have a date scheduled, so some of that wasn't completely in his control. But you can make an argument to sort of say, should they have continued with this date? Was, a month long enough to prepare for a new fighter? And maybe if something similar happens in future, that they won't take the gamble, because you can make an argument that they picked Ruiz, they thought he was the tailor-made opponent. He proved too tricky in the end. The speed was an issue. The power caught Joshua, wrecked him in that third round, never really recovered. And ultimately, of taking a short notice opponent, it's backfired massively. You can probably wipe off tens of millions of dollars, from career earnings as a result of this. It's one of these things that, the money's not going to dry up immediately, and he can have a chance to come back and be bigger and better, all that sort of stuff. But a loss does carry some weight in terms of the commercial stakes. That's why I'm sort of saying a Wilder fight probably doesn't have as much sort of oomph as it would have financially as it otherwise would had Joshua have won this, stayed unbeaten. But, if you're not fighting, these guys aren't fighting each other, they can be beaten by other heavyweights, as has been proven. So Blake Taylor says, White Ruiz would be a great fight. AJ Wilder still needs to happen. Fury Joyce and winner of Dubois Gorman to fight Ortiz. Well, there's a lot of different potential matchups that could be made in the heavyweight division. I guess the real question is, will they? I mean, with all these silos that are going on with broadcasters and promoters aligning themselves to those broadcasters, you don't see too many fighters from another, outfit fighting. Ruiz was the late notice opponent. It was going to be an in-house fight with Jarrell Miller. So from that standpoint, this is backfired. But if Ruiz could actually win the second fight, then all 4 belts would be in America, and all 4 belts would be under the PBC banner. And, some people might start talking about, well, a Ruiz and Wilder, or Ruiz and Ortiz, should he beat Wilder, Undisputed fight. But then again, I mean, this is a voluntary for Deontay Wilder too, so even if Ortiz wins, it'll be like Joshua. He will get a chance to win his belts back. But it's not a bad thing for the heavyweight division, having this action, it's a cat amongst the pigeons situation. It had been a bit of a sedate time, a little bit predictable in terms of what's been happening. Not a bad thing for the heavyweight division, for something like this to happen. And it could be the wake-up call that Joshua needs. There's going to be a lot of people waiting in on this whole situation, and a lot of people who'll be putting their hand up, to face some of these guys if they can. And it proves that, heavyweight division, one punch can really change the outcome. And that punch in the third round, it started it. Adam Fahey says Lati was only 1 hour behind from Africa to the UK. Yeah, I mean, 1 hour difference, that might not be a big thing, but it's also acclimatizing to your surroundings and that sort of thing. I'd seen a number of people actually making comment ahead of this fight between Joshua and Ruiz Jr. that was Miami the optimal place for him to be preparing? Should he have been in New York, walking the streets, training, that sort of thing? I mean, and that'll be one of a million questions that people are now going to be asking themselves about this. What is a shock loss for Anthony Joshua? Ruiz has just come in here and taken the belts and is the unified heavyweight champion of the world. I just lost my place again. I'm sorry about this if I'm missing your comments. It's sort of going all over the place. Organics, herbal supplements, cool. Thank you, bro. Yeah, you're definitely not blocked. So if you wrote another comment and I've skipped over it now, it's because there's so many comments coming in. Luke Bashian, he's a fighter. He won't retire. I wouldn't expect Joshua to retire. I guess it's a question, but seemingly he's going to take the rematch. I haven't seen the post-fight, but if that in fact happens, the rematch, it's going to be an interesting rematch. This division is sort of in flux now as a result of this result. Not a lot of people saw this coming. Andy Ruiz Jr. Winning the belts, winning the titles. But with anything, when you're the voluntary challenger, because it was a voluntary, he's going to have to beat Joshua again to retain it. And imagine if he did. I mean, not a lot of people saw this coming. I mean, it's one of those sort of things. Was it Isaac Dogbay recently? He was expected to go in there, the first fight that he had, was it against Navarrete, I think it was? And he just completely got schooled. And it happened again in the rematch. And sometimes a fighter will just have your number. And that may be the case here. That's why we need to see the rematch. Joshua, if he goes away, does some, makes some adjustments, he could totally win it. There's been so many times when a fight has come back. I mean, James DeGale was an example of it. Looked terrible in that Truax first fight. He came back and, got that one. It didn't look as hard the second time around. So, yeah, we shall see what will happen with the rematch. But we can leave that for another day. Who was the girl as he was leaving the arena? Same happened with the Mike Tyson. Girls can mess with your head. And Joshua didn't seem like he was on the ball. He didn't quite seem like he was on the ball. I can't say about the girl because I didn't see that, but someone else may be able to wade in the chat here. Adam Fahey, AJ has slowly got more and more robotic. McCracken has flattened all the kinks out. Not sure what you're saying there. Blake Taylor, AJ couldn't handle Ruiz rushing him. I believe Wilder beats AJ after tonight's display. I think a lot of people, will certainly be warming up to that if they didn't, if they didn't have someone who they were picking in that fight should it ever occur. I think a lot of people would be thinking more hard about, the potential result in that matchup. But it's one of those things I mentioned in my 10 things to watch for video as well, that Ruiz's pressure could be something that could be a factor in this fight, and I think it was. When Joshua fought Joseph Parker, there were times, just moments in that fight, when it wasn't being broken up by the referee, where Joshua didn't look comfortable going backwards. And I think we saw a little bit of that with this fight too. But yeah, I don't think we can understate how much that knockdown in round 3 took out of Joshua. Really, he never really recovered. He looked like he was starting to get his legs under him in rounds 4 and 5, but that body work in round 6 really sort of took the stuffing out of him, and he looked pretty gassed by the end of it. So Ruiz, deserved victor in this one. Unified champion Andy Ruiz, the Destroyer, living up to his nickname. So we've got Mike T saying, at Luke Bashan, and Ruiz will fight back. Wilder is faster than Joshua, but not faster than Ruiz. If Wilder exchanges with Ruiz, Ruiz will get the better of him. Very unknown result. I can't think, not a lot of people saw this coming, this result tonight, so I don't think we can just say that Deontay Wilder beats Ruiz. You have to have the fight to see, what's going to happen there. I think a lot of people after Ruiz's performance will be warming up to Andy Ruiz as a guy that they've underestimated, but some of that is on, his former promotional status. He was with Top Rank, wasn't fighting as often as he should be, the opposition wasn't great, and sometimes he wasn't putting in great performances. He fought Kevin Johnson, didn't look $1 million in that fight, but then he comes back and, because remember, Kevin Johnson was wrecked by Anthony Joshua. Ruiz fought him, didn't look fantastic, but Ruiz beats Anthony Joshua. It's boxing. Ruiz has slow feet, says Adam Fahey, but the fastest hands in the division. Yeah, the feet weren't quite as fast as the hands, that's for sure. But there wasn't a lot of wasted energy and effort from Ruiz. Very patient. He was, wasn't exerting himself, and wasting energy. And I think that was important because Joshua, was using up a huge amount of energy keeping Ruiz off him, going around the ring, but also recovering from that damage. Unbiased heavyweight rankings and news, just a bad style matchup for AJ. Low stamina fighter versus a very good come forward, very fast combination body puncher. Yeah, and some people will be saying, well, was the game plan wrong? You know, would it have been different if he didn't trade with Ruiz in that third round after he knocked him down? Shoulda, coulda, woulda, but ultimately not the result Joshua, didn't get it. Ruiz deserved the win here. Jeremy, he needs to think about losing some muscle. Every time AJ hit him, he went in for the kill, which I thought was very odd. Yeah, I mean, that old debate about is he coming in too heavy, does he have too much muscle, certainly will be reignited. A lot of people note that his best performances have been when he's been about, between 242 and 245. He was 247.8, not a huge degree above, some of those good performances and what some would consider an optimal, weight. But I guess, for the fighter and the matchup, whatever they're doing in camp, it influences the outcome on the scale. And they'll be looking at these things very carefully. Ruiz is an enigma. He takes a punch to counter with his own. Yeah, we did see that. He was more than willing to put his chin on the line after he had been knocked down. And Joshua was hitting him. But, obviously the punches were flying and he got his own work away, which hit the target. And, Joshua was in trouble. Did AJ not beat Vlad? Seems to be that it looked like it. Not sure what that's in reference or who that's in reference to. That was a case though, Andy Ruiz Jr. put it on Joshua after he was hurt. Vlad was content to step back and, Vlad did lament the fact that he didn't jump on him, straight after, hurting him. His brother had advised him in the corner, just, be patient, you get your opportunity. And it looked like almost Ruiz was going to fall into that trap in rounds 4 and 5, but ultimately got the job done. Okay, I've got to skip down a little bit. Where are we? Exactly, the body work and the 6. Yeah, that was nice. Joshua, you could see visibly hurt by that. Organic herbal supplements. Ruiz and Parker were the slickest fighters AJ has faced. Well, yeah. Styles make fights and obviously game plans too. Joshua fought a different sort of game plan to the one that he fought against Ruiz, but Parker too, it's the style matchup was a bit different. Both interesting fights for different reasons. The Ruiz Joshua and Joshua Parker. That was a tactical sort of chess match, the Parker fight with Joshua. Ruiz, we knew what he was going to do and he did it. He was effective. Truly did shock the world. He's been telling us all week. No one really believed him, but he came through and did it. Okay, so we where are we in the chat here? Is there anything you want me to wade in on here? Just drop a comment. I'm going to come to a lot of people are responding to each other at the moment. So we'll give it about 5 or 10 more minutes and then I'll be out of here, off for some dinner because it's almost 6 o'clock here. Got to do my Patreon video too. I was sort of working on that before. Got to finish it off. Right Hook Boxing, Big Up Boxing Squared. And if you haven't checked out Right Hook Boxing's channel, do so. Very good channel, very good content. I recommend that you do subscribe. He's closing in 1,000 subs soon, so if you can give him some support, head over to his channel and do subscribe, please. Marla says, Andrew Watkins, okay, responding to a comment. Styles make fights and older fighters match AJ. Okay. Kiwi 007, I see hope for our boy again. Is that Joseph Parker, you mean? Robert Thorpe, end of fight. Josh didn't look like he wanted to be there. Fear McCracken will be packing his bags. Yeah, strange ending to the fight. It was playing for time, and he seemed a little bit perturbed that it was called off, a bit of a protest, but I didn't have a problem with a stoppage. I mean, did you have a problem with the stoppage? Jeremy says, thanks for your time tonight, and thank you to Jeremy and everyone else who's here in the chat or who's been here, or if you're listening to this on replay, do appreciate it, you coming to the channel. This is just the second live that I've done. I've already been going for 90 minutes now, so I wasn't expecting to, I just thought, this is the time, hit record and just go, so thank you for joining me here. Mr. Miniature, Boxing Square, do you think AJ underestimated Ruiz with the way he just walked forward after he knocked him down? Yeah, there's a case to say. I mean, I think Joshua obviously thought he had him hurt and that he was going to get him out of there. But Ruiz, yeah, he didn't look terribly hurt when he first got knocked down. It was, I don't want to say a flash knockdown, but one of those things where he was dropped, got up, sort of shook it off. He took his time, didn't rush getting up. But Joshua clearly thought that he was dazed or something, was on him. But it didn't actually pan out for him, and it ultimately changed the fight. That immediate flurry and exchange afterwards. Yeah, Joshua, I'm sure, will be ruining that because didn't really ever recover after that. Kind of got his legs back under him, but Ruiz just kept the pressure up, kept landing the telling work later in the fight, and ultimately stopped him in the 7th. Mike T says, thanks for the live stream, do some more. I'm sort of planning to, but sometimes it comes down to timing and that sort of stuff, because I do work as well. I mean, YouTube, it's not exactly a full-time job or anything like that. It's a sort of a part-time hobby where, I just like covering the sport. So, it's one, and yeah, I do really enjoy and appreciate everyone who comes to watch my videos. Never sort of expected that, because I've just hit 15,000 subscribers the other day. So appreciate everyone who has subscribed, that everyone that's here and contributing, asking questions or making comments and that sort of stuff. And as long as everyone is respectful, you'll always have a place in a Boxing Squared YouTube comment section. You wouldn't believe the amount of heinous sort of comments that actually come into a YouTube channel. Some of them, it really is, it beggars belief, what people are thinking. And I'm not just talking fanboys, but just people who just go completely over the top, abusing people. Not just me, but others as well. So, and I try to take care as much of that as possible to, make sure that people can say their piece, but it's in a respectful way. But yeah, do appreciate you coming to the channel, being here for the live stream tonight, and supporting the channel. So where are we? God, I'm getting lost in the comments again. Right Hook Boxing, thanks mate, good to hear you go live. So do jump onto Right Hook Boxing's channel and subscribe, support him, great channel, on the way up, almost 1,000 subscribers. Let's help him get to that 1,000 or a bit closer to it. Organic herbal supplements, I expected AJ to get rocked and then get behind the jab, like with Parker, but I think the criticism made AJ more aggressive. That's the whole sort of thing here. There's the expectation that he's going to be banging guys out and being aggressive, getting the stunning knockout. And, for the most part, he has. It's not one of these things where he's been in boring fights most of the time. There was some criticism after the Parker fight, but for the most part, Joshua's responded and delivered for fans. But not every style matchup is going to lead to a knockout. Not every style matchup will end with you, winning the fight. Sometimes, there is a guy that you have to fight a certain way to beat him, and I think that's why we saw him fight Joseph Parker in the manner that he did, that it was a tactical chess match. Maybe he thought that Andy Ruiz Jr. was going to be easier work than he expected, tried to jump on him in that 3rd round and didn't pay off. Where are we now? Very nice victory, Ruiz. That's from Mishik Mbale. Yeah, it was. It really was. Massive, massive upset. Tommy says AJ jab was not the same that he used against Povetkin. Yeah, I mean, at times it was decent. Jim Davis says big street parade in Mexico. Undoubtedly. Well, he said he was going to take those belts to Mexico, and no doubt we're going to see this, and it will be gladly received, I'm sure. Ruiz stand upright so hard to uppercut him. Yeah, Ruiz fights very small. And this is why Joshua and his camp, they brought a guy in like Joey DeWeco, who's shorter than Ruiz. He's, 5'10" on a good day, as DeWeco said himself. But he fights, Ruiz fights small. It is harder to get to him sometimes. And Joshua was looking for the uppercut, but then he became very wary of getting clipped by a hook, because that was what Ruiz was following up with. Joshua became a little bit gun-shy to throw it. Robert Thorpe says AJ will not fight Ruiz next when you're coming to the UK for meet and greet. When am I coming to the UK for a meet and greet? I don't know. It sounds like a pretty expensive endeavour. I'd really need YouTube to take off to do that sort of thing. Mark Malum says, I'm a big AJ fan, but respect to Ruiz deserved win. Keeping it real boxing with squared. Thank you. And thank you, Mark. Kiwi says, AJ's legs like Dean Lonergan after that league game where he got slammed and it was called the Lonergan Shuffle. Oh, dear. AJ would surely have lost to Miller. AJ cannot handle pressure. I think he just might retire. That's Tank Commander Zulu. Well, I think, the whole thing about Joshua fighting a pressure fighter, there's a question now. Can he handle the pressure? Is he very good going backwards? I think some of that, it's a partial, he needs to work on that, but also, trying to finish Ruiz Jr. off in that third round after he had him down. That's obviously a mistake that he will regret from that fight. It changed the course of the fight. But I'd said in the build-up to this, what would Joshua be like going backwards? Because Ruiz is a good pressure fighter. That was something in the Parker fight, a couple of uncomfortable spots for Joshua. Grayler, no way to land uppercut when Ruiz Jr. protecting chin. Kevin from Chicago. What's up, Kevin from Australia? Are you from Chicago or Australia? No, I'm not from Australia. I'm from New Zealand. Organics herbal supplements. Should AJ get a touch before the rematch? Not sure what you mean there. Robert Thorpe. AJ looks slow at that weight. Well, there's going to be an examination of that weight. Was he in the right condition? Questions about the stamina, game plan, not responding to instruction, looking for those hooks. Didn't seem to be able to adapt. But some of that was, he was struggling after getting knocked down. Really had the stuffing taken out of him. Hard to recover. Wasn't able to follow the game plan really after that to a large extent. Nobby Barnes says, Joshua doesn't look like a guy who wants to fight anyone. 80 million in the bank. Well, those are the sort of comments and statements that we're going to see a bit of in the next sort of month or two, I would expect. Does Joshua have that burning desire to keep going? I mean, he might be able to get up for a fight, an undisputed fight with a guy like Deontay Wilder, but maybe motivation was at play here. It could be. Fighting a guy he's expected to beat, Ruiz Jr., a massive underdog. He thought he could finish him off in the third and got a rude awakening. Where are we? People got to not write off Joshua over one loss. He's still one of the best in the division. Yeah, I mean, plenty of people have had losses, heavyweights in the past, and come back and been better, considered great heavyweights. Joshua can come back from this. Where are we? Kashif's point of view. People got to not write off. We just read that one. AJ beat many top fighters. Wouldn't say he's a hype job at all. Probably a bad night and a bad matchup. That's all. Yeah, I don't think you can write him off over one fight. Were people writing Deontay Wilder off? At different points in his career, he hasn't looked $1 million all the time. Although he's unbeaten. There is something to be said for that invincibility, that aura of invincibility having your O. And, both him and Tyson Fury came awfully close to losing that on December 1st, 2018. Ultimately, a draw. The rematch will now be the biggest payday in boxing history. Every Mexican in the world will now want to see it, maybe like they planned. Not sure that they were planning for this, but we'll see. So Kevin says, Australians and New Zealanders sound the same. I'll have to take issue with you there because it's one of these things. Because sometimes people, a lot of people confuse me with being British or sometimes, occasionally Canadian. But yeah, for New Zealanders, Australians certainly sound well different, and I think Australians would say the same about New Zealanders. Andrew Watkins, if AJ rematches Ruiz, he can win all the belts back in one pop. Somebody said he can only win one back. Well, I mean, I guess it depends if what's on the line, because maybe the IBF will strip Ruiz if he rematches AJ. I think contractually he'll be obligated to face Joshua because it's a rematch. It would have been in the contract ahead of the fight. Whether the IBF allows it, because it's been waiting on its mandatory happen, we'll have to see. Tyson Fury got stripped that way. So it might be one or two belts, maybe it'll be all three. Remains to be seen. Why DAZN is protecting their gold cow? Who's the gold cow? Is that Canelo or Joshua? Not sure what you're on about there, Sebastian. Tank Commander Zulu. I'm not sure AJ's heart is into fighting anymore. It looked like he quit and couldn't mentally hang in there. There did look to be a little bit of quit at the end there, but it got tough and Ruiz just kept the blowtorch going. And ultimately, it was effective and he got Joshua out of there in the 7th round. Okay, well, I will just do 2 more minutes. So go fast. London says you do sound Australian. I can categorically assure you I'm not. Vato Locos Forever, Viva UK. Jim Davis, Mexico parade for Ruiz. I'm sure there will be. There will be a lot of attention on Andy Ruiz now. It's going to be very big time for him. He won't know what's hit him in the next few days as this win sinks in. Into sporting legend now. Into the annals of history as the guy that's caused one of the biggest heavyweight updates of all time. So Ibrahim Talbot says, BS, believe me, he underrated Ruiz. Yeah, Joshua may have underrated Ruiz. Maybe he just overlooked him. There's an argument to say he was looking past him. He was talking about Deontay Wilder a lot, even in Fight Week. But I guess some of those questions and these other things that have been sort of going on, it was hard for Joshua not to respond to what was happening. But has that taken some of his attention off Ruiz? And he did overlook him, look past him, underestimate him? Very valid question. Stuck in Kiev boxing. What a fight. I said before Ruiz could do it, but didn't know if the moment was too big for him. And I think, heading into this fight, we didn't really know how good Andy Ruiz Jr. had been. It sort of had been a career of unfulfilled potential. People knew he was a good heavyweight. He showed that against Joseph Parker, but how good, didn't really know. Well, he certainly proved it that he is very good. He sounds like a Kiwi to me, says Skater. That's because I am. Kiwi 007 and me, Kiwi for sure. Go fast London. Parker should get a rematch with Ruiz. Well, I mean, it'll be one of these things. People will be calling out all these guys and thinking that there's opportunities, but some of these things will. I mean, a rematch is going to be happening for sure. But even if Ruiz was to win that and beat Joshua a second time, and no guarantees there, it's probably your belts being all consolidated under the PBC banner. I think they would start running a whole bunch of in-house fights. I mean, it's a business after all. And there could be some guys he could fight there that may be of interest. What about a fight with Adam Kovnatsky? That would be interesting. Parker should get a rematch. Oh, we just read that one. I'm just going to have a quick drink. We'll wrap it up in a minute or two. I keep saying that. We're at 1 hour 46 at the moment. Andy just surpassed John as the most important Ruiz in heavyweight history. Yes, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I still don't believe my ears. BS. You saying BS is in BS or BS is in boxing squared? What, you don't believe Joshua won? Ruiz won or what? So stuck in Kiev boxing, I tell you what also, Ruiz is a potentially very matchup for Fury if Fury comes through his rematch with AJ. Fury and Ruiz would be very interesting. Well, it could be. I mean, there's a reason Dillian Whyte keeps calling out Fury. He thinks he's weak to the body. Knocked him down a lot of times in sparring, according to Whyte, which Fury has never denied being dropped in sparring by Dillian Whyte. Andy Ruiz Jr., as we saw, very good body puncher, fast hands, good combinations. But Fury's got a bigger reach advantage and even taller than Anthony Joshua. So with his movement, and we saw he could go 12 rounds and even within that be dropped and still... dropped heavily and still survive and still be able to work his way around the ring. It's a very tough style matchup, I think, for Andy Ruiz. I mean, a big guy like Tyson Fury, hard to beat if he's on point doing what he does. Lennox Lewis is happy for the AJ loss. He is jealous. Haven't seen anything that he's said yet. Straight from the post-fight video and straight onto here. John Ruiz was trash. Well, he was okay, but I think Andy Ruiz has surpassed him. Where are we? I'm an Aussie listening in Australia, and take my word for it, squared sounds Kiwi, but the legend type. Yeah, I think it's one of those things, regional accents, if you're from somewhere, you know them a lot better, you have the air for it. I'm sure there's because there's often a lot of people, because an English accent is very different to a New Zealand accent. But I get a whole bunch of people, especially from different parts of the world, who just think I'm, from the UK. And that often influences the sort of stuff that they're talking about and the way that they think I've done my video, because they think I'm from the UK. But yes, the global village, as it were, these days. You can be listening anywhere in the world to me doing this live stream right now. It's incredible to think how technology has actually progressed over the years. So Stuck in Kiev says, cheers and good night. Good morning all. Well, I think I will wrap this up as well. I've 6:15 here. Got a couple of things to do, but thank you for joining me. Andy Ruiz Jr. scoring the shock upset. Andy Ruiz Jr. shocking the world. Unified champion Andy the Destroyer Ruiz. Incredible stuff. Thank you for watching. Listening, I should say. Catch you later.